So I began to ask, well, why do we do this and why do we do this? And as a black person, I wasn't getting too many answers, because all of the scenes that we would do in class and all of the plays that I was doing or being hired for never really dealt with me as an individual. You know, this is a kind of a mass culture we live in, and it makes you look like something or act like something that you really aren't. You know, it's like a falseness. It's like a mass personality. And since white people were writing all the plays, you would get one-dimensional characters, black people anyway, so that the only thing I could play was a maid, or when I get old enough, you know, I wrote an article for the New York Times about 4 years ago. Then they started asking me to write a lot of articles, and the first one was The Black Woman, She Does Exist, because I was tired of playing one-dimensional characters that white people wrote who had no idea about who I was. Or me, not me as individual, but just as black woman. So you either end up behind a tree breathing deeply like Lena Horne, if you look like her, or a jungle bunny in some chorus line, you know, coming out of their concept of exotic or their concept of sex symbol, you know, or you become a maid, which they don't even understand that. These are not human beings, they're symbols. Or like I say, when you get old enough, you become a matriarch. And this, you know, I had all this technique and this ability, and I could not force it into these little narrow one-dimensional parts. And I remember I did a Broadway play, and Harold Clurman was the director. It was an Inge play, William Inge. And Clurman said to me, Bob, you have enough energy to do 10 of these parts at one time. We just want one part, okay? You know, and it was like, they used to always tell me, sit on your hands, sit on your hands, too much emotion, sit on your hands, you know. So I started doing the classics. And the iambic pentameter of Shakespeare, you know, and the standard English of it all just made me so narrow that I couldn't really do, again, myself justice. So I found that I was a very unhappy person again, you know. And all my life I've been around teachers. My mother's a teacher, my father's a teacher, all my aunts and uncles were teachers, and I loved to teach. So my friends who were actors at the time, one in particularly, Robert Hooks, was in The Dutchman. And a lot of kids used to come down and watch the play. And so we decided that we were going to start a theater workshop for the young kids, because my mother had said to me, Barbara, you feel better when you're doing for other people. So that was really the basis of it all. So I started working with teenagers, and they were all black kids from the Chelsea area. And I realized they had all this emotion and all this power and energy. And the technique that I had acquired could not channel it. They didn't even understand what I was talking about, because I was coming out of some kind of European puritanical thing, you know. And like it turned them off of me. So I had to either get with it or get out. And my need to get with it was much more powerful than leaving. So I began to decrud, as we say in the National Black Theater, myself, because the kids taught me an awful lot. And I began to create forms for them to express themselves through, because there were none. There were no books. There was no research for what to do with black kids. The problem came in that they were very successful. You see, the whole project became very successful, and I think it was Joe Papp decided to produce my first production, which was called We Real Cool, which was based on a poem by Gwen Brooks. And I used to use poetry because I couldn't find any plays that would express what I was trying to express. And he put it on the mobile unit, and it traveled all over the city. And the kids began to change. They began to get very professional, showbizy-like, you know, and they began to compete for parts. And they even began to compete with me for parts, you know, kids that I taught. That was the beginning of my directing years. I considered myself always a part of a black arts movement, because mostly all the plays that I did were black plays. Now that I look back on it, Douglas Turner Ward, Ron Milner, Imam Amir Baraka, you know, it involved black people who were sick and tired of, how can I say it? Just as black people had to pull out of the white church because the church was no longer relevant to them, well, black people began to pull out of Western theater or American theater for the same reasons. Many of them could, if they couldn't see it, they could just feel it naturally. They had a need to belong to a group of people where they could fulfill their potential, where they could identify with certain kinds of things that they could not identify with in another situation. A need to be in an atmosphere that is free, that is open, that is striving for truth, and not somebody else dictating to you how to do your thing, which you know how to do better than anybody else. Good example. Chinese people don't come into the black community telling them how to do their thing, you know. Black people would not dare go into a Jewish community and tell them how to do their thing. You know, the only group of people that seemingly keep telling people how to do their thing would be white people in a theater. So that black people who had a certain amount of knowledge and skill began to say, well, look, I want to do this the way I want to do it. I want to determine my own destiny. I want to determine how I am to speak on a stage. I don't want to be a mass personality. I don't want to be a one dimension. I want to be me. I want to be human. I don't want to be a slave to a European culture that's not me anyway. You know, I say it's 3 degrees removed. It's black people imitating white people who are imitating Europeans, you know. And we're 3 degrees removed from Africa, and we're African people, you see. So that the black arts movement developed, I think, out of a need to be in an atmosphere that is free, that is open, that is devoid of dictators telling you how to do your thing, okay? It's a development of everything that is included in the creative arts. It is a movement which strives to stop depersonalizing black people. We are forced to do what we consider the attractive thing to do because somebody else's culture says it is. We dress a certain way. We walk a certain way. We talk a certain way. We create a certain way. We paint a certain way. We make love a certain way. You know, all of these things we do in a different, unique, specific way that is personally ours. And we decided that it is time for us to take over our own lives and do it the way we know we want to do it, as opposed to having someone else continuously depersonalize us and tell us how we're supposed to do something because they are viewing us through their eyes, not through our eyes. Now I'm trying to become a master in an African American standard, which at the National Black Theater we evolved before we did anything else. We evolved the standard. An aspiring young person who wants to go into the theater? Well, see, I wouldn't isolate the category. Any aspiring black person who came to me and said they were interested in the creative arts, if they came to me and said they was interested in becoming a mathematician, I would give them the same advice. And that advice would be to first learn to love yourself. That is, your real self. And that's very hard to do. I'm still trying to do it. Because number one, the process of change is very painful. And it's very tedious. It's very slow. The process of change comes through conflicting, suffering sometimes even. But being aware, observing yourself, watching yourself, so that you can begin to love yourself. And if you can love yourself, that's the first step. Then you become self-motivated. And when you become self-motivated, there ain't nothing you can't do, By any means necessary becomes no longer a slogan, because there's a driving force. You say, I love myself so much, that I can start loving you, that you can start loving me, Reverend James Bevel gave us that slogan when he came to lecture to us once, and it's a very clear slogan. So the first thing that one is told when they come to the National Black Theater is to have a love affair with yourself. And the next thing is to begin to try and love someone else. And it's very hard because it takes two people to tango, But to the degree that you give love is to the degree that you get love back. So if I ain't got none in me, I can't get none back. See, so that's the advice I would give them, because if we don't become self-motivated people, if we just keep depending on white people to take care of us, to support our theaters, to give us grants, we're shucking and jiving, So I would say, like there are examples of love forces like Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin.